For decades, Ukraine existed in a geopolitical gray zone, not fully part of the West, not fully absorbed by the East. To most of the world, it was just another post-Soviet state, until suddenly it became the place where global power, history, fear, and ambition collided. What many people don't realize is that the war in Ukraine did not begin with tanks crossing borders. It began much earlier, quietly, through decisions made far from the battlefield. To understand why Ukraine became the center of the world, you need to understand geography and memory. Ukraine sits on one of the most strategic plains on Earth, a corridor that for centuries has been used by empires to expand or defend themselves. Napoleon crossed it, Hitler crossed it, and every time, Russia paid an existential price. For Moscow, Ukraine was never just a neighbor. It was a buffer, a shield, and a symbol of survival. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine became independent, but history didn't disappear with the borders. It stayed, embedded in fear, identity, and unfinished power struggles. While the world celebrated globalization, Ukraine was slowly being pulled in two directions. One side looked westward, toward Europe, democracy, and economic integration. The other remained tied to Russia through energy, language, industry, and military legacy. This internal divide made Ukraine not weak, but vulnerable. Vulnerable to influence, pressure, and eventually confrontation. The real turning point came when Ukraine stopped being a passive space and tried to choose its own direction. Moves toward NATO and the European Union were not just political gestures, they were existential signals. For Russia, this was not diplomacy, it was a red line. A Ukraine aligned with the West meant NATO at Russia's doorstep, and in Moscow's strategic culture, proximity equals danger. What followed was not sudden chaos, but calculated escalation. Crimea, sanctions, frozen conflicts, proxy wars, each step tested how far the world was willing to go. And for years, the answer seemed to be, not far enough. That perception mattered, because in geopolitics, what you tolerate today becomes precedent tomorrow. When full-scale war finally erupted, Ukraine stopped being just a country at war. It became the front line of the modern world order. Energy markets collapsed, food supply chains fractured, military doctrines were rewritten in real time. Neutral countries took sides, alliances hardened, and suddenly, decisions made in Kyiv, Moscow, Washington, and Brussels affected people thousands of kilometers away. This conflict exposed a deeper truth. The post-Cold War illusion of stability was fragile. Power never disappeared, it simply waited. Ukraine became the place where unresolved history met modern ambition, and where the rules of the global system were openly challenged. Ukraine did not become the center of the world by accident. It became the center because the world allowed unresolved tensions to accumulate, believing that time alone would solve them. But history doesn't dissolve, it returns, and when it does, it rarely asks for permission. The real question now is not what happens next in Ukraine, but what this moment reveals about the future of power, borders, and conflict itself.